Welcome to today's episode of Financial Fluency. Today I have Sarah Kaler with me from Soul Powered. Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hi, it's great to be here.
So I know that you have a really interesting history with corporate and with leadership training. Could you tell us some about your background?
Absolutely. So my background is interesting. Actually, I started as an entrepreneur and then was recruited into the corporate world, which a lot of times that part of my story gets missed because everyone focuses so much on my big corporate experience. But I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and then was recruited into corporate and had this big corporate career with Lululemon Athletica when I started when they were very young. And then did basically a decade of service with them in a lot of senior leadership roles, both in business operations and a lot of leadership development.
So, and then did that lead you back into entrepreneurship eventually?
Yes, it sure did, which I know we'll talk about in more as we talk here in more detail. But yes, I always knew that I would at some point start my business again, or start a business, I should say. In around 2008, I started to actually see clients on the side part-time while I was still in my corporate job. And it happened organically at first. I didn't really have an intention to start on a particular date. It just organically evolved. And then I had this side business part-time, which started to take off and grow. And at a certain point, it became clear to me that I was going to be moving in that direction sooner than later. So when I did leave corporate and take Soul Powered full time, it was definitely clear that I was heading in that direction.
So what was the original entrepreneurial business that you had before going to Lululemon?
My very first business was a yoga studio.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does. It does now, looking back. It's funny. A lot of people say they don't see how all their life experiences or their business experiences make sense. Mine definitely does in the grander scheme of things. Yes, Lululemon recruited me almost right out of my yoga studio. It wasn't quite that linear of a transition, but almost. I actually was one of their first wholesale accounts in Washington State and in the entire U.S. So they didn't have any stores yet. They weren't even in the U.S. marketplace when I started a relationship with them. So it was way back, way back. So yeah, so that's how I sort of started contact, I guess you could say, with the company. But I wasn't looking for a job. I'll just put it out there. I thought I'd be self-employed forever. So yeah, it was an interesting turn of events at that point in my career.
So now that you have Soul Powered, explain exactly what kind of services you provide to people.
Yeah, so now primarily what I do is I work with women CEOs who are successful, right? But they're ready to scale. And typically the women that I work with, they have a track record of success. They've got revenue. But what's happening is they either are burning out or they are definitely in a period of overwhelm, and they're looking for how do they get to that next phase, that next chapter, while trying to do the highest level of their work in the world, right? So they're typically women who have a big global mission, a vision. They want to make a big impact. They want to have influence on a global scale. And what's happening is they've probably done a lot of work up until this point. They've had a voice, they've had a product or service. Some even run nonprofits. I mean, it's a diverse group of women for sure. And what's happening is they need a team, right? They can't do it alone. And there's I would say even a stage of letting go, right? From being that founder to what's it going to take to scale up and get to that next level of your work, which is as a visionary, a leader, a CEO, really the next phase of growth as a company and a business owner. So I really support women stepping into that phase and gaining both leadership skills, but also operationally what needs to happen.
That sounds really important. And it sounds like in your work with Lululemon, going from yoga studio when they did not yet have stores and they had very few wholesale accounts, It sounds like you watched them go through that exact transition as a company. Is that right?
Yeah, I did. It's interesting. When I joined Lululemon, I think I wish I had the exact count, but I think there was about 35 employees at the head office, maybe 40. And they definitely had stores across Canada. So that does not include, retail store employees. That was just head office. But what that meant for me is it very much felt like startup mentality, right? So the back end operationally felt very much high growth, fast growth startup mentality. And we were in it together, creating it. And my job at the time was definitely to start to help build that US market. And so we did, and it took off, as most people know. It was fast and furious. So definitely scaling is something I have a lot of experience with, and also building world-class teams and building incredible cultures that are based on leadership and people and purpose. So that's something I'm very passionate about, and that's something that I help women in leadership roles now do for themselves.
That sounds fantastic. A lot of the people that I talk to on this show are entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, people who have their own business, some of whom are really successful, but most of whom have not taken that next step to really build a team that does the operations for them while they have that sort of vision mentality, not micromanaging, letting go of some of that. How do you help women make that transition?
Yeah, well, a lot of things have to happen. I mean, some of the key things that have to happen is, one, you have to start to recognize your genius and really step into your strengths, right? Because you're right that in the early phases of business, especially as a solo entrepreneur, you do it all. Right. You are the marketing department, right? You're doing everything, right? You're the admin, you deliver your service or you create your product, and you're really the do-it-all mentality. And a lot of that hustle and even the passion behind it works for a while, right? And then you get to a certain point where maybe you just need those first one or two people to support you. And often what happens is people outsource, right? They sort of outsource, and they have an outsource mentality where it's not necessarily a bad thing, but there's a distinct shift that has to happen at a certain point where it's outsourced to kind of get it off the plate. Mm-hmm. And then there's a shift where you start to see your company as a culture and having a strategic vision and a mission and values, and you start to want to look for world-class talent to bring in that's behind that vision and mission and values, right? That wants to have a seat at the table and really contribute to your body of work. And that's a different energy, right? I mean, if you're going to, I want to help women see that distinction, right? Because there's where you want to function in your genius and where you're effective and where you get the most results and where, frankly, you're most engaged and lit up, right? And then there's the other piece, which is that you want to be able to hire these great, talented people, which, frankly, you want them to think like entrepreneurs, right? You want them to be self-starters. You want them to have that mindset of being able to really act and think and work on their own, but be behind your vision, right, in their mission. So, and that's an important skill to be able to have, right, to be able to hire and know how to recognize those people, but then also how to onboard them and train them and bring them into your business. Mm-hmm. And then there's, of course, how do you lead them, right? How do you communicate with them and set them up for success? So those are really critical skill sets, and also it's transition, right? Making that leap. And there are definitely moments that we all still have when you start scaling up in revenues where you can still outsource things, right? On a contractor basis. I mean, for some, their teams are always going to be built from contractors, and that's the right structure, right, for a lot of virtual teams. But when I say bring people into your business, you can still onboard contractors into your business. And I think that mentality is really key, right? To take the time to really set people up for what it's going to be like to work with me, and the expectations and the values. It's really important. And it's a different mentality than just outsourcing on a like Upwork or Fiverr or whatever it is. And it's not that those don't have a place and a time, and they absolutely do, right? Mm-hmm. But it is a distinction.
Well, I even noticed just the difference from going through something like Get Friday or Zirtual, where they match you up with someone to hiring a designated VA. I noticed a big difference for myself, but the idea of actually having team members who are almost partners in the vision, that sounds amazing.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So if someone's listening to this and is like, okay, my revenue's been getting up high enough to where I probably do need to take on something more significant than a VA from, say, Zirtual or Get Friday or something like that. I hear Sarah talking about this amazing, almost partnership with someone as being part of my team who is dedicating their ideas, not just their, not just hours, but like ideas and inspiration and their heart into it as well. What's the next step? How do they do it?
So I love this question. I love it because it's the difference between feeling transactional and feeling like somebody has the seat at the table and they're contributing, right? They're contributing, and there's an ROI on that, right? Not just for you and your business, which I know everyone listening cares about, right? They're invested in that, but also for that human being that gets to contribute, right? Because high performers and talented people, they want that. So that's something that you really want to pay attention to, right? When you start to interview people. So, step one is get clear on what you need, right? So what is it that you need or you even want or desire to have in your business for that partner? Even if they are a VA, maybe they're a really skilled VA, you want to get clear on what are the skills or the strengths that you want to have in that partner and in that role. And frankly, they should be complementing your strengths. Right? So don't just go hire yourself again, right? Hire somebody who does something really well and that, lights up in an area that is a weakness for you, so that you have somebody firing in an area that is not your strength. And that's going to really be successful for your business. So look for that, really get clear, identify that. And also, once you do that, identify what are the traits you're looking for in a person. What are the traits that of the qualities of a person that you want on your team, right? And this might be driven from some of your company values. You might say, well, I want somebody who, always meets their timelines, or is somebody who's a self-starter, somebody who has integrity, somebody I can trust, right? So you want to get clear on those things before you even go post your job, or your job description, right? Saying I'm hiring, universe, world, our team is open for business. Before you even get to that step, get really laser sharp clear yourself. Because once you do that, it's so much more simple for you to find that person, because when you're interviewing, you're looking for these traits, you're looking for these strengths and skills. And as you're asking questions during an interview, you're going to be observing or not observing these things in return from the person that you're interviewing, right? Like either through behavioral questions you're asking them, or questions that reveal, are these a strength? Is this a strength for her? Did she have integrity in that situation? Right? Is she demonstrating, X, Y, or Z here? Right? So you want to be able to almost reverse engineer in a way who you're looking for, and then go and find that person.
So in my mind, as you were saying that, I was thinking about myself somewhat, but let's just say there's an imaginary person listening who is like, okay, I love having ideas. I love coming up with the topics, the sort of big picture stuff. I hate finishing it. I hate the PDFs, the details, making the worksheets, those kind of things. So if that's the person who is like, I really like the big idea, I want someone who will do the nitty gritty, but I also want them to catch mistakes and solve problems and contribute suggestions, come up with new ideas. Yeah. But what would they do? How would they find this person then?
Yeah. So, what I'm hearing is you want somebody to sort of project manage with you, right? You want to think big picture, right? But you want somebody in the details and also to help provide ideas, but to kind of keep on track.
Yeah. Right? And make sure things get completed.
Get completed, right? So somebody with project management skills will not only make sure that those deadlines get met, right? The key milestones along the way are being checked off, the task list, all those things. They love that stuff. Mm-hmm. Right? They thrive in it. In fact, if that structure isn't there, they're going crazy, right? So you want to find that person who, when you interview them, they go, oh my goodness, you need to have this system set up in your business. Here are my favorite systems I use online. And what are you using right now? Because you need to implement these. Oh, and by the way, here's what I would do in your business. Right? So during the interview.
Sounds like a great interview.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, but that's what a more entrepreneurial mindset is that's how they're going to show up, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to show up and they're going to have ideas for your business in the interview.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're going to want to contribute. They're going to be excited in an area that's a strength for them, and you're going to see it and you're going to feel it.
And I think that's a really good point for people who are listening to this who want to join somebody else's team, is to research the business before the interview and come up with ideas, right? To have something to offer when they come in. I think that's great for both sides, because some of the people that I talk to, and I know some listeners of the show do things like a VA business. They are VAs themselves, or they are support staff or OBMs, that kind of stuff. So I think that's great advice from both sides of how to have a good interview. Because I have never actually worked in corporate, I can't say that interviewing is something I personally know a lot about.
Yeah.
But okay, so back to our imaginary CEO who's looking to build her team, who has been outsourcing, has been doing those things. So I love that advice for coming up with a list of things she wants someone to have. What other tips would you have for her?
I think the other part is, do you mean in an interview?
Well, just for how to create that team that you were talking about, the team that sounds like, oh my gosh, this is going to make my life so much easier.
I think, once you find a candidate, right, you definitely want to have that candidate there's a couple options that I would say: either have that candidate go through a second interview, or give them a test project. Right. So you want something that's really, really important with candidates is they show up different in different contexts and with different people and at different times. So doing one interview really isn't enough. Right. So if you say, have somebody that you really trust on your team who's been with you for a long time. So a lot of people listening might have an OBM or somebody on their team that's been with them, who understands them, that really gets them, right? Have that person participate in the interview process with you, right? And get their insight and their perspective. And perhaps even what I love is give them a test project. Say, you know what, like, especially if you're, say, hiring somebody on a marketing project or something of that nature. So that gets outsourced a lot, right? A lot of marketing tasks or ads or copywriting or, a lot of different marketing stuff is really common. So maybe you give them just a little trial run and you say, we have a project right now. And the best kinds of projects are real projects, not made up projects, because then you can see how would this person potentially handle something that's real in my business, not just this made up idea. I mean, if you don't have something in real time, you can make something up. But I think it's best when it's actually something you're facing in your business today. And you say, you know what, I'd love to see a copy sample of what you would do in this scenario. Or I would love to see what kind of ad campaign you think would do best based on what's happening in today's market and what's converting best. Or, you know, give them a little trial run and let them go off and come back and see what you think. Is it in line with not only the results that you want to produce, but your voice, the energy of your business, the goals of your business? Does it feel in alignment with how you make choices and decisions, right? If it's completely off from how that person interviewed and what they said that they produce, or the quality of work that you were expecting from them, that's going to be a red flag, right? Mm-hmm. But if it's consistent and you start to see congruency, that's going to be a really good sign, right? And some people aren't as strong in a verbal interview, but then when they produce work, they blow your mind, right?
That's a really great point. So in my world, the thing that I interview people most for, this is a little off topic, but it's for working with my kids. I have 2 kids with special needs. And so I end up having people in my home doing home therapy, and then also go to school with my kids as their one-on-one aides. And even though we have a couple other businesses, our ranch, we've only had one changeover in the last 10 years, one employee changeover. We tend to keep people much longer times than the other businesses that I work on. But for this one thing, I had been trying to narrow down, like, what do I need to look for in the interview to really know what they're going to be like later on? And I've ended up doing a 90-day trial period. But even then, I'm like, I keep trying to find out, like, okay, if they answered this way about this, or if they show up late, just all the little things that have been red flags in the past, because we've gone through a lot of people for that. And it does seem like there's got to be some science to figuring out the best way to find the right person for the right job in the interview. So all of that is so helpful. I really appreciate you sharing that. It's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that what you're just speaking to, the people that you bring on in your personal life for support, all of this applies to that as well, because as entrepreneurs, regardless of where we need support, we need that as well. It's our foundation, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, as leaders, we need it. It's so essential. So team is team, right? And all these things apply across the board.
And that's true. When I'm insecure about the home staff, everything else is harder for me to focus on if I'm not happy with someone who's in my home.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And especially with somebody who's having virtual businesses, there can be a real distance, especially if you're not having close communication. There have been times where I have had, a VA who's maybe in a different time zone or something, and there can be a delay in finding out that I'm not happy with things, and that can be hard as well. But it is such a global marketplace now. It seems, on the one hand, it opens us up to a lot more potential talent to be able to work with people in different countries and do things like we're doing right now on Zoom, recording this and talking. But on the other hand, it does put some distance.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So if someone is listening to this and is hearing your voice and saying, oh my gosh, what she does is exactly what I need right now, how can they get in touch with you and how can they work with you?
Well, there's a few different ways that people can work with me. I think the number one way to get in touch with me, I think, would be to come to my website, soulpower.com, and you can reach out to us various ways on the website. It's really clear when you land there. And just reach out. I mean, we're very available 24/7. In terms of working with us, we work with CEOs in various ways. We have masterminds that go far and deep into the business, and of course have peers, right? Peer-to-peer mentorship built in, so that you're around other women of your caliber, right? So one of the things we hear is it's lonely at the top, right? So it's important that when you're at a certain phase of business and you're in the top percentile leading a company, it's really important that you start to surround yourself with other people who are facing the same challenges as you and who can also contribute to you. So we do have masterminds available. I have a handful of clients per year that I work with in a coaching consulting capacity, one-on-one. And we do also have a smaller group program that we run. So we have a few different ways that people can work with us.
Well, that sounds great. We will put links to your website in the show notes. And if there's anything else that you want us to link to, we'd be happy to.
Yeah, definitely. Since we talk so much about hiring, we've got an awesome free guide on how to hire your dream team and really get these A players into your business. And it's a guide that goes over interview questions and a lot of what we've mentioned today about how do you prep, what do you think about, and how do you go through a successful interview. And it even has a done for you template around how to post a job description. How do you post an actual we're hiring job description online to find someone great that's really for you, that's clear, that talks about your culture, your company, and it's really a great piece right out of sort of our swipe files, right? That we used to only make available to paid clients, and now we recently put it together all in a guide for people to access.
Oh, great. We'll definitely put a link to that. And I think I'll check it out because with the school year coming, I'm actually hiring for my home team again.
Perfect.
So that will help me get my head in the right place for finding that perfect home support person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the bottom line with hiring is, it all comes back to not only your time, right, and your purpose in the world, but ultimately your ROI here and your revenue and your relationship to time and money and your purpose is really connected to your ability to hire and onboard and train your people well. Right. So your ability to scale and grow your business and your relationship to this is really essential.
Thank you so much for joining us today. That was such a good message. I can't wait for people to hear this.
Oh, so thank you so much for having me.
A lot of us who have to create copy of some kind in our businesses, who have to create content and write different pieces of your website and whatever, it can be a real struggle.
It can be a real struggle. And that's why I created a copywriting course so that I could teach people my methods and they could do it for themselves.